Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. I am Rick Tryon, Director of the Taylor Leadership Institute. And on behalf of the Taylor Leadership Institute, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the 4th Annual Taylor Talks. And I'll apologize up front. I'm not exactly Claritin clear here. I'm struggling a little bit with my voice and with some medicine, so if I dry up here, please give me a pass. I think we've got a terrific program for you in store this evening, and you're going to hear from 4 of our students who have either graduated or are soon to graduate from UNF with their designated major and, of course, with a minor in leadership. And for the students in the audience, let me just remind you, when at your places you found an evaluation form, please do fill these evaluation forms out and turn them in at the table as you're leaving here this evening. Before I start tonight, I want to take just a moment and recognize some of the distinguished guests who we have here with us, and I'll start by recognizing Dr. and Mrs. Bruce Taylor, who are here this evening. Dr. Taylor is the President and CEO of Taylor Engineering. We have Mr. Dave Reed, who is the Chair of the Student Affairs Leadership Committee. Mr. John Lucas, also a member of Student Affairs Leadership Committee. Ms. Kay Nichols, World Affairs Council of Jacksonville. Dr. Mark Dawkins, Dean of the Coggin Business College. Dr. Jeff Chamberlain, Dean of the Hicks Honors College. I didn't see Dee Kennedy sneak in. Is Dee here? Okay, Dee didn't make it. How about Derek? I'm looking at him, for heaven's sakes. How do you miss a guy you're that big? So Derek Marinatos is here, the head of the coach, the soccer coach. We have Major Carlos Aviles, the Associate Professor of Military Science from the Reserve Officer Training Corps with us. We have Miss Carrie Driscoll, Academic Specialist and wife of the world's greatest basketball coach. Dr. Lucy Croft, the Associate Vice President for Student Affairs. And I didn't see my shipmate, Captain Bob Ewan, show up, so he is in a state of unauthorized absence, as we say in the military. And I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge my incredible staff from the Taylor Leadership Institute. Dr. John Frank. John, raise your hand, please, in the back. The Assistant Director. Corey Hilliard, my events coordinator over coordinating off to the side. Corinne Stukes, our outreach, community and campus outreach in the back. Lori Stanton, Office Manager and Assistant Projects Officer. Dr. Matt Olson, who is our TLI Faculty Liaison and the Director of Camp Osprey. And we have our 2 federal work study students, Johnny Ballard and Heidi Andrada. And where are you guys hiding? Outside, okay, there you go. All right, and Corey, special shout out as always to Corey, who pulls all of this together for us whenever we have a major event. Terrific job. And finally, what I'd like to do is I'd like to ask this year's graduating leadership minors who are here in the audience to please stand so we can, number 1, make sure you get credit for attending, but number 2, to recognize you. Okay, congratulations to all of you. And when graduation rolls around and President Delaney is speaking, he will ask all the leadership minors to stand, and I just encourage you to stand with conviction. All right, the Taylor Leadership Institute, or TLI as it's better known, is a department within the Division of Student Affairs responsible to both the Vice President of Student Affairs and the Provost in Academic Affairs for the administration of the Leadership Minor Program. The broader purpose of the Institute is to facilitate the interdisciplinary education and the experiential development of competencies and skills to empower our students to become effective, ethical, and values-based leaders in the community. The Leadership Minor is an academic initiative that is unique to the University of North Florida, and it's available to all students in all of the respective colleges. The minor is built around the intentional study of leadership and consists of 4 3-hour courses each. And the introductory course, LDR 3003, is the gateway course, and it's followed by 1 primary elective, 1 interdisciplinary elective, and then our capstone, our practicum course. The practicum course culminates with each of the students presenting a short capstone talk that embodies the essence of his or her personal leadership journey. And in just a few minutes, that's what we're going to hear from our students joining us tonight. But now it's my great pleasure to introduce the namesake of the Taylor Leadership Institute, a graduate of the United States Naval Academy who served in the Nuclear Submarine Force, the former chairman of the UNF Board of Trustees, current president and CEO of Taylor Engineering, who along with Dr. Mauricio Gonzalez championed the founding of the Leadership Institute. Dr. Taylor is the recipient of numerous awards and leadership recognitions, but if I were to read this very long list in front of me, we would never get on to the main event here tonight. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Bruce Taylor.
I'll try and be brief. Leadership is interesting. There are many forms that leadership takes, and it depends upon the individual how that plays out. I think when you become serious about leadership, the first thing you need to know is, what are my strengths and weaknesses? Because everyone has their own style. That could be good or it could be bad. But generally, once you figure that out and see what you think, if you give an honest evaluation of your inner pluses and minuses, then you can start working on developing your leadership skills. It's not easy, but it can be done, and it can be done very well. Your best asset, however, I will tell you, is your character. I know you've heard a lot about character in your studies, and it's very important. You cannot lead anyone, you couldn't lead a dog if that dog or that individual did not trust you. They are in your hands, and you have a big responsibility when you get to that point. So I encourage you all, as you go from here and mature and develop as productive members of society, think about your personal character. Integrity, honesty, all these things that you've heard about. They are not just words. They are things that make you what you are, and you must have them combined with your personal proclivities, if you will, or attributes, develop into a good leader. If you do that, you will be very successful. So I'm so proud of all the students here that are participating in this program. I think it's extremely important to UNF, but also to you, more importantly. And we are working hard to make this a great success. We are on the ascendancy, and we're going to get there. So congratulations. Do well. Have a great summer if you're not coming back to school. And we'll see you along the way.
Dr. Taylor, June, thank you very much for your continuing support and for your generosity of the Institute. We couldn't be here without you. So now on to our capstone speakers. Our first speaker this evening hails from Jacksonville, Florida. He's homegrown. He took the Introduction to Leadership course from the previous director of the Institute, Dr. Annabelle Brooks. His primary leadership elective was intergroup dialogue. Omari is a UNF senior graduating this spring with a major in English and a minor, of course, in leadership. Currently, he works as a student engagement and communications officer for enrollment services, and he hopes one day to run his own foundation and to become a chief executive officer. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Omari Kemp.
Can you hear me? All right, awesome. All right, so 50 years ago, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act and also the Housing Act of 1968 that allowed, regardless of race, regardless of religion, regardless of nationality, housing for everyone. So about 50 years ago, people of color began to pack up their bags and leave the poverty-stricken neighborhoods that they were raised in and integrate themselves in suburban neighborhoods where there was life, where there was opportunity, and where there was hope. So in 1994, my parents, who are sitting over there, they did the same thing, and they packed up their bags, they packed up their belongings, and they left their poverty-stricken neighborhood. And they brought me and my brother into a suburban neighborhood to also give us a life of opportunity and a life of hope and safety and protection. So I spent my weekdays in this suburban neighborhood surrounded by green grass and white picket fences. I spent my days at the beach surfing, hanging out with my friends, surrounded by safety and protection. But my parents, they didn't want to keep me from losing who I was, losing the identity that I was raised in, to keep me from losing my culture. So on the weekends, I spent my weekends with my grandmother and a few of my cousins who also live in the urban neighborhood. It was a neighborhood so far different than where I laid my head down. You see, I came from a neighborhood where there was green grass and white picket fences. But in this neighborhood, it was so far different. It was a neighborhood infested with crime, a neighborhood infested with drugs, broken buildings. You see, the roads, they weren't like the roads that are around here at UNF. These roads were crooked. But what was interesting about this neighborhood was that, everyone looked like me. They had the same skin color as me. But yet they didn't talk like me, or neither did they have presence like me. So I was raised in these two different cultures. It was neither black, it was neither white, but together, these two cultures, they made me perfectly great, which defined who I am as a 21st century leader. As us leaders, as we emerge in the 21st century, we must understand and we must appreciate the culture differences that we have, because it's more important than ever. We must be able to understand which work styles are simply the result of personality and which results are because of this person's upbringing or because of their culture perspective. We must comprehend, we must know each other. When we look at our peers, we just can't look at them as peers. When we look at our colleagues, when we look at our bosses and our employees, we just can't look at them as our bosses and employees. We must go deeper than that. We must understand who we are. We must understand the culture at which they were brought up. Because, see, that's the only way we're going to be able to understand them and understand their work style. But I never knew how important it was to be this diverse leader until my freshman year here, when I enrolled in Honors Colloquium, and for that year, the theme was refugees. So a few people in my small group, you guys were in? Yeah. So I was enrolled with my small group, and we were the English tutors. And every single Tuesday, we would go down to this church, and we would actually teach English to these refugees. And these refugees, they were from various Asian countries, various Latin American countries, and various African countries. But these refugees, they were a little different because many of them were fleeing the militias that were trying to take them out. Many of them were royals fleeing from the government. Many of them were the only person from their families here. So our approach to teaching these refugees was so far more different than if I were teaching you guys English. Because on the outside, these refugees, they looked like adults. But on the inside, they were broken and scared and afraid little kids. So as 21st century leaders, it's our mission to learn about the mix of people that we're around. And we must learn to create a diverse, inclusive environment so that we can make this mix work and so that we can also be great communicators. You know, communication is actually one of the reasons why I became an English major. You know, I feel like when people think about English majors, they think about grammar, they think about writing, they think about spelling, yeah. But there's so much more to being an English major. You know, as an English major, we learn to think well, we learn to communicate well, and we learn to synthesize complex ideas into meaning that anyone can comprehend. And one of the most important things that we learn as English majors is empathy. And as 21st century leaders, we must also learn that. We must learn to be great wherever we go, whether it's in our home, whether it's in our organizations, whether it's in our schools. We must be great leaders, leaders that understand cultures, leaders that understand people. And you know, throughout my 4 years, I actually got a chance to do that. You know, my first job was as a swim instructor, and I was working with kids between the ages of 16 to 16. Yeah, seriously. Various kids from different backgrounds, different religions. You know, many of them had different skill levels. So how I taught Sarah was not the same way that I taught Kiera. How I could teach Omari won't be the same way as I teach Alejandro. I had to understand the upbringing at which these kids came from. Instead of having a standard at which I teach swim lessons, I had to understand them and teach according to their cultural perspective and to their upbringing. Currently, I work as a student engagement and communications officer. And what we do as communications officers, we advise current students and prospective students. Yeah, I'm the one that's calling y'all. But as a student engagement and communications officer, one of the things that we do is we try to express diversity, inclusiveness to the people that we call. You know, when I get my screen, when I look at my screen, I get a chance to see who the student is. I get to see what their nationality is, what their religion is, what their race is. And as a communicator, what we do is we analyze this person. And when we analyze this person, we tell them, maybe if this kid is Jew, we tell them that we have a Jewish alliance here. Or maybe if this kid is a African American, I let them know that, hey, we have a black student union here. Maybe if this kid is Asian American, I let them know that, hey, we have UNF Asia here. I let them know that even though they might come to the school where everyone doesn't look like them, where everyone doesn't come from the same background as them, there's a place for you here. And as 21st century leaders, we must do that. When we go out into the workforce, we must do that. But as I come to a close here, can everybody just look to the right of the person? Yeah, look at to the right of the person. This person that you're sitting next to is a future leader. You know, one day, one of you guys are going to be a millionaire. One of you guys is going to be the next Bill Gates, the next Oprah Winfrey. Many of you guys are going to be future doctors and future lawyers. Many of you guys are going to be future teachers. You know? Yeah. And as these leaders, we must realize that, you know, we have the power in our hand. We have the power to make a difference. We have the power to be agents of change. So let us not forget that when we go into the workforce, when we become these future CEOs, remember that we have the power to understand. And because that we can understand, we can be 21st century leaders. So let's go out into this world. Let's be the 21st century leaders that I know we can all be. Let's be great, and let us be great. Thank you.
So Dr. John Frank is the primary instructor for the practicum course, and whenever the students get up at the Taylor Talks, he's pacing like a nervous dad outside of the room. But we actually have Dr. and Mrs. Kemp here this evening, and I see them beaming over in the second row, and you have every reason to be proud of your son. Terrific job, and the future is very bright. Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining us. Our next speaker is Diana Shanks. Diana hails from the Tampa Bay area. She took the Introduction to Leadership course from Dr. Annabelle Brooks. Her primary electives were intergroup dialogue and collaborative leadership. Diana graduated in 2015 from Pasco Hernando State College, where she was the Vice President of Student Government and President of Crew. She transferred to UNF, where she worked for housing, parent and family programs, and Spinnaker. She graduated from here in the summer of 2017 with a degree in public relations and, of course, the leadership minor. Her former public speaking experience includes her 2015 graduation ceremony, a first place presentation at a statewide RA conference, and as a panelist at an annual conference for high school student guidance counselor. She intends to pursue her master's in higher education to work in student affairs at the collegiate level. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Diana Shanks.
When I was 15, I was kicked out of a church for having a girlfriend. A year later, I was elected the president of the biggest Christian club on campus. A year and a half after that, I won an award because out of 46 presentations at a statewide conference for RAs, I gave a presentation called Let's Talk About Sex. I tell you these three rather bizarrely juxtaposed life events because each one correlates to something I want to talk about today. The first, being kicked out of a church for having a girlfriend who I wound up dating for 2 years, marked the start of my pursuit of connoisseurship. I was cut off from the group of people that for years had been my closest peers and from the adults whom I had grown to revere as my moral compasses. I was forced, before I was really ready, to accept that I didn't agree with these people anymore. But in order for me to find out what it was I did believe, I had to teach myself. I was lost, and as the newly indefinitely grounded daughter of a very close-minded pastor, there was nobody to give me any direction whatsoever. And so I became a self-directed learner. I taught myself opposing belief systems with little guidance. I read the Quran, the Vedas, the Torah, the Bible, the Pali Canon. I read Kierkegaard and Nietzsche and Wittgenstein and Kant and Hegel, and I hated a lot of it. But I learned a lot. And one thing I learned was that the default people who are in my life are not inherently qualified to teach me everything I need to know about life. That knowledge was something I have to work for myself. And so before Dr. Jameson taught me the term connoisseurship, I would say of myself, I believe in taking the scholarly approach. But really, both terms are about learning as much as you can about something and becoming as good as you can at that thing so that you can go out into the world being confident and capable in executing that thing. And for me, that thing is the pursuit of truth and knowledge through intellectual freedom, which is a line a lot of you should recognize because it's UNF's first core value, which Dr. Frank tells me I am a poster child for. The most pristine example I have of this in my life is that I started an initiative at my previous college where I was the vice president of student government, where I researched legislation passing through Congress that was relevant to students, like the Guns on Campus bill, and I compiled bipartisan information and distributed that information to students along with contact information for their representatives. I would then poll students on campus to see how they felt about these issues, meet with administration to discuss the college's investments, and meet with our FCS and college lobbyists to deliver a cogent statement. So it became important for me to pursue intellectualism for myself and then to teach others. And this is where the leadership comes in. In the pursuit and distribution of truth and knowledge, my balcony is my alone time, generally reading, and my dance floor is literally every other interaction. So I make a deliberate effort to be characteristically dialectic, to be that person that people can come to with tough questions and to bounce ideas off of that I didn't have growing up. You will also find as I continue the speech, I am, in Dr. Frank's words, gracefully irreverent. And I apologize a little bit. The second anecdote that I mentioned happened at the same college when I was elected the president of Crew. It was our biggest campus ministry, but at this point, I was a pansexual agnostic feminist who only ran for the position because a year and a half after the first incident, my mother was still not letting me out of the house for fear that I would engage in whatever debauchery she thought lesbians did on the weekends. And I was successful in that position. People liked me and respected me because I was a good leader, and I really did know what I was talking about in terms of theology. But through that experience, I learned the importance of congruence and authenticity. Being deeply conscious of yourself is often regarded as the most important part of being a leader. It's the first step of the social change model, and it's why there's such a focus on personal values in every piece of leadership literature. Congruence is something that we were probably first introduced to in geometry, learning about identical lines, but in this case, it's about aligning our actions with our beliefs. Naturally, I eventually recognized this as something that I struggled with terrifically. So going back to self-directed learning, I bought James T. Robillata's book on authenticity for leaders, and something that stuck to me for years is that it's important to note that it's not that you can't be successful without being authentic. Many CEOs and politicians are very successful and wildly incongruent. For me, it's about the fulfillment and not carrying the fear of being found out. Fear forecloses potential. When you know you're a fake, you feel fear and anxiety. And when you're afraid, you don't take opportunities, you don't excel, you waste your potential. I lived with that anxiety for so long. Nothing is scarier than being a pastor's kid with a secret girlfriend and then hiding a Quran under your bed. Now, I do not mean to imply that you must be honest and reveal your true self in every situation. 5 months ago, a few months after I wrote and delivered this capstone speech, my dad died, pretty suddenly, unexpected heart failure. The only reason I'm in front of you now is because I took a gap year before grad school to help support my younger siblings and to mourn because I loved him. But by the end of this speech, you will know more intimate details about me than either of my parents ever will. Sometimes the right choice is to cloak yourself, but choose wisely, because there are a few things more gratifying and more important in your confidence as a leader asking people to trust you than to be able to bare your soul to another and to get love in return. So chase that when you can. So as a leader, I want everyone to think that I'm qualified and competent and reliable at all times. So this is a lesson that I had to learn to apply in 2 situations. To my personal life and figuring out how to be authentic in an environment with the explicit threat of being disowned, and in terms of leadership, how to accept that I cannot always lead by example, because I'm not perfect, and that makes me quiver, because I understand that weight and that responsibility of being a leader, and I don't want to mess it up. But we're still human leaders, and if we can't be publicly open to discussing our shortcomings, we are rejecting the potential of collaborative leadership to help us improve. If I'm truly striving for connoisseurship as a leader, that should overpower my fear of being caught failing. This brings us to the third event. Last year, I submitted a program proposal that I truly did not think would get chosen to the annual Florida Resident Assistant Conference called Let's Talk About Sex. The program was essentially me teaching and then facilitating a discussion about sexual and relationship wellness and these things that we wish we had known and lessons we learned along the way. The premise was that even though statistics tell us that most college students have had sex, there's still so much taboo and shame, and this silence doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help people who have things they need to cope with. It doesn't help people who've been miseducated. It doesn't help people who recognize what is and isn't a healthy situation. My program, out of 46 presentations by RAs from 16 state universities, most of which were about much safer topics like mindfulness and pen pals and sushi rolling and recycling, was voted first place. And that really solidified for me that social justice and activism and radical pedagogy are top priorities for me. I tend to pursue my master's degree in higher education and student affairs to work at a college, hopefully either in administration or an on-campus identity center. And I feel really fortunate to be going into a field that values diversity and social equity as much as I do. So this is the third and most personally important topic for me. I strive to be a change agent. Parker Palmer writes that consciousness precedes being. which is to say that what we think and do forms reality, not the other way around. This is a very scary and very empowering reality to accept, because he also writes about the responsibility of being human, which for me is advocacy for other humans. I do this by engaging in radical actions, like standing in front of 60 people and talking about blowjobs, but also through subtle pedagogy, like pointing out to my mom how crazy it is that she worked 40 hours a week like my dad, but then when they both came home, she was the one expected to take care of the kids and do the grocery shopping and the cleaning and cook. It's almost like she was working a second shift, but only getting credit for one. Now, for those of you who are new to feminist sociology theory, the second shift is a coined and recognized term by Arlie Hochschild, but it is only through these intimate and caring communications and personalizations of our knowledge that we as leaders can truly challenge the way people think and feel. I believe that part of what makes me an effective leader is that I successfully bridge the gap between people who care deeply about social activism and those who are much less open-minded to it. I am not a bitter ex-religious kid. There are many things about the church that I still adore. Nobody talks about compassion and mercy the way the church does. Being passionate about radical social progress, as well as deeply empathetic to traditional religious populations, allows me to be an effective teacher to both. I've learned to treat political and social activism as a compulsory lifestyle, whether it be marching in pride parades, standing in line for an hour and a half to get into the town hall to talk about the HRO, or just calling and writing to legislators. Local government is an easy way to do this. I have no say in what Donald Trump does, but I might be able to reach Lenny Curry. In leadership, we're called to reflect on the wellspring that we draw from, but truthfully, I'm not sure why I am the way I am yet. I know that a lot of my guiding values have come from religion, but I also know that I'm not religious. As per Dr. Frank's guidance, I was reading Thomas Merton, and he writes, "Yesterday in Louisville, at the corner of 4th and Walnut, suddenly I realized that I loved all the people, and that none of them were or could ever be totally alien to me. Thank God, I am only another member of the human race like all the rest of them. I have the immense joy of being a man." And I think that sums it up for me. To me, if I truly believe that marginalized populations deserve equal rights, why would I not fight for that? If I believe that sex shouldn't be stigmatized, why would that not be reflected in my approach to modern culture? If I think that the Florida college system needs better funding, and I know the name and phone number of the person who makes that decision, why would I not call Rick Scott? And if I want to be a leader, how can I not set an example of action and help others take action for causes that resonate with them? If I, Diana Shanks, am to feel confident asking others to trust me as a leader, I need to make sure that I am advocating for the well-being of those around me and in being diligent to create social equity. In religious terms, Richard Rohr said that we often fail to reconcile orthodoxy with orthopraxy. Nothing gets better when we choose not to act on what we believe. Because most of us are incredibly well-intentioned, but well-intentioned does not stop female genital mutilation in Ethiopia, it does not stop the countless unnecessary wars, and it does not stop religious persecution. That requires action. And I believe that we are accountable for the injustices that we tolerate, and that we are obligated to fight our own moral disengagement. I will not be complicit in the oppression of other people. I've read more philosophy staples and holy texts than any other 21-year-old I know, and I still don't know why we're here or where we came from, but I hope that we're going to a place where we make life better for each other. And I owe it to that better future to act in congruence with my beliefs, and to be a connoisseur of the pursuit of truth, and to take what I have learned and apply it for the betterment of humanity. Thank you.
So as we move on to our next speaker, I just want to remind the audience that at the conclusion of our presentations, there'll be an opportunity for you to ask questions. So if you're not taking notes, you may want to start. Our next speaker is Joshua Castellanos. He had Dr. Matt Olson as his primary introduction to leadership instructor. He took collaborative leadership as his primary leadership elective. Josh is a UNF senior, graduating this spring with a major in sports management and, of course, a minor in leadership. Josh was born in California but escaped at the age of 7 to Florida. He is a graduate of Nice High School and currently plays men's soccer at UNF, where he was co-captain of the 2017 season. Please join me in welcoming Josh.
The ability to make decisions is our greatest gifts as humans and as leaders. Effective leaders know how to make wise decisions, and it's our choices that define who we are. My name is Joshua Craig Castellanos, and Northeast Florida has been my home since I was about 7. I spent the last 3 years here at UNF. It wasn't until the junior year where I decided to pursue the leadership minor. See, leadership wasn't new to me. It was this thing that I always did, but I didn't realize that I was doing it. I guess you could argue that I was a natural leader, but just because I was natural didn't necessarily mean I was good at it. My style of leadership is servant leadership, and when I lead by example. And this leadership style has followed me since I started my soccer career at the age of 3 years old. Growing up, my dad was my soccer coach, so yes, I was a typical coach's son. I played every minute of every game, even if I had a broken leg. And although it had its perks, it wasn't always easy for me. I did extra drills, I did extra practice, and for a while I played on 2 teams. Spent most of my nights in hotels and on highways. As soon as we'd get in the car, my father would lovingly tell me everything that I did wrong that day. And I knew that he had the best interest of me, but it was hard. But it was because of how hard he was on me that I was able to succeed. And it was because of my abilities that I was able to have an influence on the field. And this idea of influence has haunted me. He would explain to me that I had to set examples for my teammates. He would explain to me that he was trying to get them to do something, and if I wasn't doing it, then they wouldn't either. He would always say, "Don't forget, somebody's always watching you." So if I worked really hard at training, if I ran after every ball, my teammates would do the same. If I was lazy and I wasn't paying attention, my teammates would do the same. Here's what he was actually saying. You're not the only person on this planet. The world doesn't revolve around you, Josh. There are other people here. You have a responsibility to recognize how the way you live your life will influence how someone else will live theirs. John C. Maxwell said it best that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. Now, it's important for everyone to know that everyone has the power and ability to influence. Whether it's by your speech or by your actions, you have the power to influence. You can be a leader. Every time I stepped on the field, I realized that I was a leader. Whether I liked it or not, I had influence based on my abilities. When I transferred to UNF as a sophomore, as a stranger to the team, I was a leader. In leadership, we coined a phrase that there's no one definition of leadership. So leadership is influence, yes, but Stephen Covey also said that leadership is a choice, not a position. So a year goes by, and I'm entering the spring semester of my junior year, and I get a phone call from the coaches that asked me to come into the office. They asked me to be the co-captain of the upcoming season. When they asked me, I refused. I didn't want to. And it wasn't the first time that someone had asked me to be in a leadership position. Before I was at UNF, I spent a year at Trinity Baptist College over on the west side. In high school, I was the captain my junior year and senior year. At Trinity, I was a captain there. So I knew what the position does. I knew what the title meant. And I was going into my senior year already, and I didn't want the responsibility. I was scared. It was during that same semester that I decided to pursue the leadership minor. I knew that I had been regarded as a leader by multiple people, different times, so I felt this responsibility that I should pursue this. I wanted to become a better leader for myself and for my team. I wanted to inspire. I wanted to be the best leader that I could be See, leadership is a choice, but it's also a responsibility. At the end of the semester, I walked back into the coach's office and I accepted the position. I knew that I didn't have all the answers at the time, but I knew that we were going to face issues. But I was ready to face them head on. I wasn't going to shy away from the spotlight, but I was simply just going to step into it. To make the long story short, my final season, we had 3 wins, 10 losses, and 2 ties. It was the second worst record in the school's history. As a player, I performed my worst on the field, and my influence almost vanished. And it was in this moment that I realized how little influence positional leadership has. See, my teammates would only listen to me just because I had this title of co-captain. But at the base of it, they didn't trust me. It wasn't because I was playing poorly. In leadership, we have defined already tonight that leadership is trust. Now, I can admit that I didn't have my best days. I made a lot of sacrifices to be in the position that I was in, so I kind of pointed fingers and I pointed blame. I wondered why other people weren't making the same sacrifices that I was making. Surely it couldn't have been my fault. But the truth was that it was. I wasn't being transparent with some of my issues off the field, and I wasn't willing to open myself up to my teammates. I wasn't trusting them. At the end of the senior year, despite the failure of a season, I still had some professional tryouts. I went to Charlotte Independence and I went to Nashville Soccer Club, but I yet to leave an imprint on the coaches. And my soccer career ended. I felt like a failure. I mean, I did fail, but I really felt like a failure. I felt like I let my family down. I felt like I let myself down. My whole life, I was the one who was supposed to make it. I was the coach's son. I was the captain. I had everything lined up for me, and suddenly, I was the one who never made it. The past winter break was very hard for me, spiritually and physically, mentally. I isolated myself from people. Most of my nights I spent in bars. Most of those nights I don't remember. I wonder why I had this passion and this dream of becoming a professional soccer player and why I had all these things lined up. And suddenly all the doors that were open were bolted shut. Why did I sacrifice my very self for the sport? And after everything, just why? And it was a question that I couldn't answer for the longest time. At the beginning of January this year, I decided to just focus on my internship. I just knew that I had 1 semester left. Let me just graduate. Let me just get my internship done. If I could just graduate, I'll be all right. For my internship, I was placed under the wonderful Carrie Driscoll. And it's here that I was able to kind of impact lives, really. I spent my internship at Student Athlete Academic Support Services. Did I get that? I think SAS for short. So I had a successful academic career and I had a successful soccer career despite the season. So I kind of just poured myself back into just the athletes that were here. Most of my mornings I didn't know what I was going to do. I just kind of just offered myself. What can I do? I remember going to Miss Driscoll's office. Hey, what are we doing today? What do you need done? You need to go to the library? You need to take books all the way to the library? All right, I'll do it. How many trips we got to do? In leadership and in life, we're not meant to go alone. As the semester progressed, I leaned a little bit more on Miss Driscoll, and she kind of poured herself into my life. One afternoon, we were talking, and she said something that resonated with me. And it changed my life. She said, sometimes our hardest struggles in life give us our most important lessons. So I just couldn't figure out what the lesson was. So I started to think back on everything that happened. And when I started this leadership minor, I was kind of clueless. But I knew that I just wanted to be authentic. Just wanted to be real. I wanted to be myself. It's something that we value here, and it's a topic that in leadership is always brought up. I took the Myers-Briggs personality test 3 times to make sure that I was an INFP. And for those of you that kind of just doesn't make any sense, here's what it means. I'm an emotional introvert that overthinks everything. In leadership, you need to know who you are. Socrates gets credited to this phrase, but he's not the only one to say it. Know thyself. For you Drake fans, know yourself. Know your worth. Even though I knew what I was, I didn't necessarily know who I was. I realized that I start shutting people out when trouble arises. I have this tendency to be independent. I have this idea of I can fix it myself. These are my problems. But this whole Lone Ranger persona will only get you so far until the world eventually just breaks you. I also realized that it's very hard for me to open up to people, to trust. And this was my stumbling block as co-captain. See, I wanted to be authentic, but how could I be when I wasn't being transparent? I learned that transparency leads to authenticity. But authenticity shows weakness, which is why a lot of people don't want to be authentic. And at the time, I thought my teammates would think of me differently. I didn't trust them, and in turn, they didn't trust me. See, effective leaders choose to be transparent. Effective leaders choose to be authentic. So about 3 weeks into the month of January, I get a phone call as the head coach of Jacksonville Armada. His name was Mark Lowry. He asked me to join preseason camp for about 9 weeks, and I didn't know what to say at the time. I'll think about it. Let me call you back. And as soon as I hung up, the failure and just doubt littered my mind. The failure of last season. Was I good enough? Did he know who I was? Surely he didn't see last season. Talked to Miss Driscoll about it, and she said, just go try. Just go do it. I've learned that we're not defined by our failures. It's how we respond to failure that defines us. I realized that I wasn't a failure. I just failed. And that was okay. So here I am with the decision to make. I could accept or deny this offer. Or I could just ignore and hopefully Mark Lowry forgot who I was. So I made a choice. To get back up. I learned that effective leaders accept their failure, but they don't live in it. Effective leaders are resilient and choose to say goodbye to yesterday. Effective leaders take initiative and face their fears. I eventually called Mark back, and I walked through the door that was so perfectly placed before me. It's been a week now. But now I can proudly say that I've achieved my dream as becoming a professional soccer player. There's a famous quote, and I'm not sure who said it, but it goes like this. If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. In leadership and in life, we're not meant to go alone. We need each other to be accountable, to lean on each other, to bear one another's burdens, to grow. Without Miss Driscoll's leadership, my dreams would not be a reality right now. And for that, I'm grateful She has changed my life and has inspired me to inspire. I'm grateful for who I am, and I'm grateful for where I was. Everything that has happened to me here at the University of North Florida has helped me grow as a person and as a leader. Leaders are defined by the choices they make. It's those choices that determine how effective they will be. If it wasn't for my decision to pursue leadership, I wouldn't be standing here before you. As I close tonight, I leave you with this. Always go with the choice that scares you most, because that's the one that's going to help you grow. Thank you.
Carrie, I hope you brought your own Kleenex. Okay. Okay, well, this brings us to our fourth speaker this evening. And you know, it's hard to be last. It's all been said, but not everybody said it. And Christine McFaul is joining us. Christine is the old lady in the group. Christine took Introduction to Leadership from Annabelle Brooks, Dr. Brooks. Her primary leadership elective was intergroup dialogue. She is a communication artist who focuses on social media management, web development, and digital marketing for PS27 Ventures, excuse me. A visual thinker with a passion for web design, Christine creates and improves all aspects of a client's digital presence. Millennial-minded, with extensive experience in building social brand awareness, she builds social media following by creating colorful graphics and videos to tell the story. Keeping up with the community, Christine sits on the board of St. Vincent's Surecliff Society and the Jacksonville Chamber Professional Women's Council. Christine holds a bachelor's degree in public relations with a minor in community leadership from the University of North Florida. In her free time, she enjoys teaching painting classes, international travel, and volunteering at the Jacksonville Humane Society. Please join me in welcoming Christine McFaul.
It's a long bio. Thank you for the warm welcome, and I'm so excited to be here today when Doc Frank reached out to me and said that there was an opportunity for me to come speak about leadership. I was overjoyed, and I'm so happy to be here. My name's Christine McFaul, and I graduated from UNF 4 years ago. It seems like it was just yesterday, and it seems like it was a century ago at the same time. I love my job. I work at PS27 Ventures, and people always ask me, what does PS27 stand for? PS27 is a Bible verse that our CEO and managing partner, Jim Stallings, would recite before going into battle. And what that verse recites is, it asks the question, what shall I fear? And I think some of what our other speakers have touched on is one of our biggest fears is getting to know ourselves. So I ask you guys tonight, what do you believe in? I believe in education. I believe in having an open mind to new ideas, and I believe in teamwork. When you graduate from college, it's a transitional period. I'll be the first one to say it. You still have to do your homework. Unfortunately, you can't just rip everything up and throw it out the window like you see on TV sometimes. You still have to do research. And for me, that meant applying to different jobs. When I graduated, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew what I believed in. And I think it's a myth to say that when you go to college, your parents tell you to go get a degree. I want you to walk away from this talk tonight knowing that you earned your degree. You didn't just get a degree. So it took me some time to look down from the balcony and see what was going on in the dance floor and decide what I wanted to do with my life. When I first graduated, I was applying to 9-to-5 jobs in communications and PR and different ad agencies, and it was a really exciting time. But when I was going to those interviews, I just couldn't imagine myself in a 9-to-5 job at age 21. I, from there, decided that it wasn't the best option for me. I was better off by applying to internships and to jobs that I was passionate about. So when I first graduated, I moved in with my parents. It took me some time to decide that I wanted to live in Jacksonville. I didn't want to lose the community that I loved so much. And I applied to work at a painting studio, teaching painting classes. I had taken one drawing elective while I was at UNF. I applied to work for an ice cream company that was a company that I had met at my internship, and they were an entrepreneur. And I had applied to work taking pictures of people who are hang gliding in Amelia Island at Hang Glide USA, because that was really exciting. And I thought, maybe if I'm up in a hang glider, I will somehow become a pilot one day. So those are the jobs I applied to. And the confidence that my leadership minor gave me the social skills to rock those interviews, and I got all 3 jobs. So my day was looking pretty crazy at that time in my life. And it's something I wouldn't trade for the world. I love the creative environment. I love taking 5 classes a day and applying those concepts to what I do. So I had an opportunity to take a full-time job, and I didn't take it. And I felt like that was part of failing at the time, because there was a big paycheck that was associated with that full-time job. And I decided that I enjoyed what I was doing more than that paycheck was worth. We're all beginners. Sitting in your seat today, even if you've done the job that you're doing for years, you are a beginner. Keep that continued growth mindset. You can't be afraid to grow in the areas that you're passionate about. Don't be afraid to ask for that recommendation letter from one of your teachers when you're applying to jobs. Don't be afraid to reach back out to your old teachers and ask for volunteers. Dr. Frank can attest that I still come back to UNF and ask for things. Don't be afraid to have a friend look over your resume before you apply to a full-time position. And I know you guys really want to sell your books back to the bookstore at the end of your college journey, but don't do that. Save them. You'll never know when you need to pull out a textbook. Just the other day I was at work, and one of my managers told me, we need a crisis communications plan just in case. There's so much crazy stuff going on in the news. We need crisis comm. And I was like, you know what? I took that class. I need to call Professor Doggett. I need to talk about crisis communications. And just the value in your education is going to go on with you throughout your life. Leadership is about teamwork. And when I was a kid, I would always watch Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Any of you guys want to be a millionaire? Yeah. Especially working at a venture capital firm, we're all capitalists. We're all trying to figure out how we're going to make this work financially. But I was always so impressed when I would watch Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and they would use a lifeline and phone a friend, and that friend, without even listing the 4 options for that question, would just shout out the answer. It would be like Uganda immediately, and that person would have the answer. And I would be so impressed. You can just phone up a friend, and they would have the answer. You can't be a leader without a team. And often we think of leadership as just one person at the podium speaking to a group of people. But I wouldn't be here without the people behind. Today I work with dozens of entrepreneurs, and every day I'm living my dream. What do you believe in? Each of us has the opportunity to be courageous, to do our homework, to fail forward, and to phone a friend. So I'll leave you guys with a quote from Mary Kay Ash. If you think you can, you can. And if you think you can't, you're right. Thank you.
Okay, we've just heard from 4 terrific representatives of the University of North Florida, and I'll tell you that there were 23 others that were part of this graduating class with the minor that were every bit as compelling in their narratives on leadership. And it's a testimony to all the instructors that we have, the professors that we have in support of our leadership minor. So just a terrific job. I think this evening we learned about cultural intelligence, choice and transparency, failure, resiliency, change, choice, and values. And it's just a terrific compilation of the kinds of things that leaders will need to be ready to embrace as you cross the line, graduate, and move into the ultimate reality show that we call the real world. So at this time, what I would like to do is invite those in the audience who have questions to move to one of the microphones in the aisles and prepare to ask whatever questions that you may have. I'm going to start as the moderator here by asking the group, and Omari, I'm going to start with you. What was the most important thing, concept, idea, that you learned while you were intentionally studying leadership?
So I think one of the main concept that I learned from leadership is to learn who you are as a leader. You know, we can't begin to learn leadership until we know exactly who we are as a leader. You know, you might be an emergent leader, you might be an adaptive leader, but learn who you are as a leader. And then once you learn that, begin to study that thing, and then we can be the best leaders that we need to be.
Would you pass that mic to Diana?
For me, it was definitely taking action. I said it in my speech, but I really believe that most people's moral compasses are properly aligned. That's not the problem with the world. The problem with the world is good people doing nothing and good people with good beliefs not taking action. So I can't sit in the corner and know that I care about all these causes and not take action on them and act like I'm doing anybody any good.
Mine is two things. Is that leadership changes in every, just different environments. What works in one environment may not always work in a different environment. So just being able to adapt to that and able to recognize. And then come back to me, I lost my second one.
So I would say that being a leader means sometimes having to turn your back on the crowd and standing out. You don't always have to be like everyone else.
Okay. So, questions from the audience? Johnny.
Hello. This is a question to everyone. In your own word, well, in one word, define leadership. Like, what would be one word?
One word, and we'll start with
Oh,
you,
man.
Christine.
Integrity.
Hard. It's a hard job. That's it.
Engagement.
Change.
Thank you.
Thank you, Johnny. I guess somebody moving to the mic? Okay, perfect.
So a couple of you mentioned that you weren't necessarily sure about taking the leadership minor, that it was something that came to you, after you'd already begun your studies. So how do you think you would have been different if you hadn't taken it?
I was going to say, you were holding the mic.
Well, I knew that I wanted to take the leadership minor, but if I didn't take it, I know I wouldn't be speaking in front of a group of people right now. But I just think that the leadership minor gives you a direction and a path, and allows you to reflect and articulate the experiences you've had at UNF. So I think we go through life kind of just day to day, and what I've heard from everyone who's up here is that they've actually taken a moment to look back on what makes them who they are.
Joshua, take a shot at that.
The funny thing about leadership is it's just not about leading people. When we think of leadership, we think of kind of like a dictatorship type mentality. But leadership it's all about kind of just knowing who you are. So I think all of us up here, just because we have decided this leadership minor, I think we're very in tune to who we are as people and what we value. And it's, as she said, our values and kind of just who we are kind of guides us in life and everything. And I feel like if I didn't pursue leadership, then my dreams wouldn't have come true. I wouldn't have been able to connect to the institute staff. I wouldn't be able to sit up here. It just be a different life. I don't know. I can't explain it. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Connections. Everybody takes something different from the academics. We've all clearly taken a lot. but I have made eye contact with Dr. Croft like 40 times tonight, and she doesn't know it, but she's my idol. Like, I love her so much, and I am speaking in front of her. And I asked Dr. Frank to write letters of recommendations. I'm looking to change jobs, and I'm willing to bet that man can write a good letter of recommendation. No, so honestly, even if you're a little bit wary of the academics, everyone will take something different from it. I'm sure you'll take something for it, but even if it just results in you getting to meet all of these people, absolutely worth it. You don't have to. You can if you want.
I'll go ahead. I think with leadership, taking this class, I got a chance to learn that, we all can be leaders. I feel like before I actually took the class, I thought leadership was something that was maybe up here. But when we started doing our ELTs, which was pretty much, it gave us a chance to write how we're actually doing leadership in our everyday life. I began to see that, I was a leader all alone. I just didn't realize it. So I feel like when we take this leadership class, we get a chance to actually see that, we've been doing it all along and that we can all be leaders.
Thank you.
You talked about connoisseurship, and I thought that was a really interesting piece. So I was interested if each of you would share, maybe outside of the program, because I know the minor is geared for that, but whether it be a book or a podcast, something that you, like your top number one thing to grow and learn about leadership.
Like a recommendation?
Yeah.
James T. Robillata wrote a book on authenticity for leaders, and he's also a speaker, and he was amazing in that form. Before I was even part of the leadership minor, that was a really influential book for me.
James T. Revelata. Write it down.
I'm a big fan of TED Talks.
Okay.
The speaker that we have coming next week, Drew Dudley, does a good piece on just a lollipop moment. So Google that. Just be able to recognize. It talks about being able to recognize influential people in your life and actually saying, hey, you're an influential person in my life. That's basically what the TED Talk is, but just TED Talks. TED Talks, podcasts, YouTube, anything.
For me, it's going to be Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert.
Okay.
It's about creativity and leadership in the front of mostly doing what you love.
Think on that one because I wanted to give you some good advice. But I think, yes, definitely reading books about leadership will be good. But I think just like what you're doing right now, come out to different events, networking. I think that would be the best thing for you. Be around people who are actually doing something that you want to do.
Thank you.
Okay, all good advice.
I'm also an alum for the leadership minor. I graduated 3 years ago. So love this. It's great. So one of my questions is what is one of the biggest challenges or cognitive dissonances that you experienced going through the leadership study? Does that make sense? Like like mental processes that you had to kind of challenge through from your own personal life and what they were trying to teach you, or just different ideas that you kind of held very close to you, and then you realized that it might not be what you imagined it would be? Does that? Okay.
Yeah. I think for me, well, throughout my 4 years here, I actually did like a lot learning about leadership. So that wasn't really the struggle, was learning it. But I think from the 4 years is digging deep down into who you are.
Yeah.
I think that was like one of my concerns in practicing leadership. But in the real world, I think one of the issues that we might have is working with different people. Because when we go out into the world, there's different personalities, and you actually have to work with every single person, and you two might not align together. So I think that's will be a main issue. Yeah.
Obviously, as I said in my speech, gracefully irreverent has become part of my identity. Thank you, Dr. Frank, for that phrase. Clearly, dismantling taboo is a big thing for me, and accepting that as something that can be beneficial and not just something that gets laughs or that I have to hide was really valuable. And even Dr. Taylor speaking in the beginning and saying leadership will look different for everybody. Everybody will have a different way that that manifests itself. I was like, okay, please don't be mad at me for the things that I'm going to say. But that was really comforting because it is, and that's true. We all have different styles, and some of those styles are out there, and some of those styles are exactly what different people need at different times. So just not being afraid to say the things that are kind of scary to say in a room full of people can be beneficial.
I think my biggest struggle is being able to match what the textbook is saying versus what the real world says. And to be able to just make that connection, because there is a connection there. There is. But it's just being able to recognize it and then to be able to act accordingly through that, through what I've learned, through everything, and just observing, and then just to be able to act on it instead of being a bystander.
So I'd say being in the real world, the biggest thing is just understanding that not everyone around you is from the same academic background. Not everyone has leadership training and understands what you're understanding, so having patience. It's a big thing.
Thank you.
Okay, great question. Unfortunately, we are at that point in the program this evening where we're out of time, but the good news is we're also out of questions, or at least questions that are going to be asked publicly. I would ask for the speakers to please stay back afterwards so we can get a group photograph. I would also ask those in the room who are rising seniors or seniors who plan to graduate this summer or fall, who have an interest in the leadership minor, please see Dr. Frank in the back of the classroom. He would like to meet with you and talk to you a little bit about the practicum course. And as we conclude, ladies and gentlemen, I'd ask you to kind of join me in giving it up for this terrific group of students.
Rick, if I may, there are, at least that I can tell here, 3 people who are also alumni. One actually asked a question, and they're in very special places. And I would like to just acknowledge them briefly. Claire, okay, flew all the way in from Kansas City to visit, and happens to be today. And we welcome you, health administration major, now working in youth corps development, if I'm not mistaken. Robert Rittenhouse just accepted, he graduated last term, just accepted, you see him at Chick-fil-A all the time. He just took a job at Ernst & Young, starts next week, okay? And Kauser, who you just heard a question from, just got admitted to the graduate school in Seattle University to pursue a master's degree in student affairs. And forgive me if I missed any other older graduates. If you did, raise your hand. Everybody else is a current graduate. But I know Rick, and I know Doc Bruce here, and I know all of you people here. This is, you know what this is for me? This is hands-on. You worked all weekend and you painted the room. And you can look back and you can see it. It is so graphic. It is so real. These people are changed people. These people are going to go out and make the world a better place. You can tell Dean Diane, I said that, I quote that. Of course, she stole the quote from us. And every one of you people, from the deans to the people on our advisory board, and I'm missing a bunch of people. I want to acknowledge the man he doesn't know I'm doing this, the man who's running the show tonight. Rick Tryon has brought such a renewed focus and collaborative commitment. He's a change maker. And of course, change makers, you all encounter resistance. God, do we encounter resistance in the bureaucracy of the university? And I know Dean Chamberlain can tell you stories about that. It was essential part of his talk, but we all just celebrate you, and we are all gratified, and we are all blessed and graced. And thank you for every one of you for doing what you're doing to make these students who they are. You too, and a bunch of other people.
Good.
Rick, forgive me, Rick.
John, thank you very much. I've already written your evaluation for the semester.